lack of proper drinking water, absence of health delivery systems, child labour. These are just some of the social issues that enterprises in India have started addressing. However, these corporate social responsibility or CSR initiatives seem to be restricted to large corporations. What about the smaller firms?
You're always running after money that is required for payment of salary, or your production problems, your delivery requirements, your raw material shortages. Therefore, as an individual, the person doesn't focus on the human aspect of the business.
Industry doesn't have people, to take care of this peripheral development works. Because if you want to take care of those things, you need to have people working on that line. You have to have a mindset for that. Yeah.
Can the limitations of smallness be overcome? Going by the experience of the SMEs of the sports goods cluster in Jalandhar, it does seem possible. Firms here get most of the manual work done from household units. A decade ago, many of these units were accused of using working children. Entrepreneurs were keen to address the issue. However, as individuals, they did not have the time or the resources. That's why 30 SMEs came together to form the Sports Goods Foundation of India, or SGFI.
Our foreign customers should not accuse us that we get the stuff made by children. With that one thing in mind, we had started.
With resources pooled in, SGFI started a monitoring system to ensure that none of the household units used child labour. But this was not enough.
Eliminate child labour. What is it? What to do with that labour? Not that you eliminate from sports industry and send them to a bicycle manufacturer or repairer, go and fix the punctures. We thought that the best way is to show the way to them to school.
SGFI joined hands with the government's National Child Labour Project. It now runs 8 special schools for children who have been withdrawn from work. And school children who need additional academic support can attend one of the 30 tuition centres being run by SGFI. The organisation has also started microcredit groups for women, a charity program for the poor, and free health camps for the community at large.
Because of the community-based programs like self-help groups, health and charity, the community now trusts SGFI. When we say that send your children to school and don't put them in labour, they now listen to us.
Clearly, the collaborative approach is working for the Jalandhar SMEs, as it is for the sponge iron units in Rourkela. Entrepreneurs here have come together and formed a society which implements rural infrastructure projects like installing hand pumps for drinking water. It also conducts free health camps in rural areas.
See, there are n number of advantages working together. First of all, we are all pooling together resources in one common fund. And second, we can afford a complete infrastructural setup. We got a wing to take care of all the medical services. We got a wing to take care of all the infrastructural development.
Collaboration clearly works. Similar SMEs located in a close geographical area can address common social and environmental problems through a cluster development approach, an approach that will help them overcome the limitations of smallness and fulfill their social obligations. Today, social responsibility is becoming a movement. Many enterprises recognize that they have an important role to play in the well-being not only of their employees but also of the community at large. For growth, in order to be sustainable, cannot bypass the people staying in the surrounding areas. Growth has to be inclusive. However, this social responsibility movement is usually associated with big corporations. What about the micro, small and medium enterprises or MSMEs?
A small or a medium entrepreneur has got so many other things to do the whole day. He is basically in charge of everything as far as his unit is concerned. So for him to open up another front,
everything right from production to finance to managing top to bottom happens through the entrepreneur's initiatives. Therefore, as an individual, the person doesn't focus on the human aspect of the business.
The question then is clear. Is there any systematic approach that can help MSMEs discharge their social responsibilities effectively?
The MSMEs can exhibit socially responsible behavior by working collectively rather than on an individual basis, at least on some of the issues. And this is what the UNIDO's project was keen to explore, whether the cluster development approach can actually lead them to effective outcomes or not.
The United Nations Industrial Development Organization, or UNIDO for short, initiated the MSME Responsible Behavior Program in India in 2005. 3 different MSME clusters in 3 different parts of India were chosen for exploring the possibilities. Jalandhar. This North Indian city is home to the growing sports goods cluster. There are around 115 exporting units here, and together they have a turnover of more than $100 million. But much of the actual work, entirely manual in nature, is subcontracted out to the large number of household units. And many of them, till at least a few years ago, were accused of using child labour. In order to address this issue, around 30 exporters came together to form the Sports Goods Foundation of India, or SGFI. That was in 1999.
Our foreign customers should not accuse us that we get the stuff made by children. With that one thing in mind, we had started.
SGFI's approach was to try and convince parents that they should remove their children from work and send them to school. This process was strengthened when UNIDO started supporting this project in 2005. Today, this program is managing 8 special schools. They are all a part of the government's National Child Labour Project and are meant only for children who have been withdrawn from work. Meenu is one of the new learners here. She recalls her working days.
सवेरे उठ के नहाते थे, फिर ब्रश करते थे, फिर खाना खाते थे, फिर फुटबॉल सीखते थे, फुटबॉल सी मम्मी जी, डैडी जी, मैं, हम लोग सीखते थे। उसके बाद शाम तक सीखते रहते थे, फिर शाम को मम्मी खाना बनाते थे, हम शाम को खाना नहीं हम मदद कराते थे मम्मी के साथ, मदद करा कर के फिर खाना खुना खा खू के सो जाते थे।
Many former working children now attend these schools. Then, after taking a test, they are admitted into formal schools like this one.
If we go by the history of this project, we have mainstream 90% children to the formal education system.
But sending children to schools was not enough. Support was needed to help the first-time learners cope with the structured curriculum. And for this, the MSME Responsible Behaviour Program started tuition centres for the regular school-going children.
पहले बच्चे बहुत मुश्किल सी स्कूल का काम मैडम दिंदे सी मैडम कर नहीं सी पाउंदे ते पढ़ने की बड़ी परेशानी हुंदी सी ते मैं भी नहीं सी पढ़ी लिखी जो मैं पढ़ा सकदी सी मैं भी अनपढ़ हां ਤੇ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਬਹੁਤ ਮੁਸ਼ਕਲ ਹੁੰਦੀ ਸੀ। ਦੂਸਰੇ ਦਿਨ ਛੁੱਟੀ ਕਰਨੀ ਪੈਂਦੀ ਸੀ। ਇਹ ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਸੀ ਮੰਮੀ ਮੈਂ ਅਸੀਂ ਕੰਮ ਨਹੀਂ ਕੀਤਾ ਵੀ ਮੈਡਮ ਡਾਂਟਣਗੇ, ਸਾਨੂੰ ਮਾਰਨਗੇ, ਇਸ ਲਈ ਵੀ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਛੁੱਟੀ ਕਰਨੀ ਪੈਂਦੀ ਸੀ ਦੂਸਰੇ ਦਿਨ।
Today, there are 30 such centers helping more than 800 children. Known as Muskan or Smile, these tuition centers have helped reduce the number of dropouts who may well have joined the labor force once more. After all, poor parents have powerful economic compulsions to make their children work, and convincing them that they should send their children to school has never been easy.
लोगों को कन्विंस करने के लिए बहुत हमें एफर्ट करने पड़ते थे कि क्योंकि उनका जवाब होता था कि हम जो इनकम उनसे हो रही है बच्चों से वो कंपेंसेट कैसे करेंगे।
That's why the SGFI UNIDO initiative started a microcredit program for many women from such household units. Earlier, whenever they needed money, they would borrow from informal money lenders at an exorbitant interest rate of up to 10% per month. And if they could not repay,
ਤੇ ਫਿਰ ਜਦੋਂ ਕਿਤੇ ਪੈਸਾ ਸਾਡੇ ਕੋਲ ਨਾ ਦੇ ਹੋਣਾ ਤਾਂ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਆ ਕੇ ਸਾਡੇ ਤੇ ਕਾਰਵਾਈ ਜਿੱਦਾਂ ਵੀ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਬੋਲਣਾ ਮੰਦਾ ਚੰਗਾ ਤੇ ਫਿਰ ਸਾਡੇ ਘਰ ਨੂੰ ਕਈ ਵਾਰੀ ਡਰਾਵਾ ਦੇਣਾ ਵੀ ਜਿੰਦਾ ਮਾਰ ਦੇਣਾ।
Today, the women borrow from their own self-help groups at a much lower 2% per month. Moreover, many have taken loans to start income-generating activities. Apart from self-help groups and schooling, SGFI has also responded to the local healthcare needs. It has conducted free medical camps in factories, in neighborhoods where there are a lot of household units as well as in the NCLP schools. Around 45 camps have been organized and more than 6,000 people have attended them. Harnessing individual charities of enterprises is yet another initiative. It is now being implemented collectively by a newly formed organization called REACH. REACH has been started by the wives of SGFI members. It collects old clothes, books, school bags and tiffin boxes from the well-off and distributes them to the poor through schools and camps. Charity, health camps, self-help groups, all these initiatives have helped the cluster address the issue of social responsibility and child labor.
Because of the community-based programs like self-help groups, health and charity, the community now trusts SGFI. I mean, when we say that send your children to school and don't put them in labor, they now listen to us.
Such willingness reflects the effectiveness of various community-based programs. And these programs have been possible because the cluster development approach has helped to build the capacities of SGFI. It has also enabled it to strengthen its linkages with government programs, with schools and religious institutions which help implement the charity initiative, and the Lions Club which provides for the doctors during medical camps.
UNIDO played a major role. They came up with ideas, they came up with know-how, everything which we as factory people didn't know.
The same cluster development approach is now helping the engineering and fabrication MSMEs of Tiruchirappalli. Entrepreneurs here felt that occupational health and safety needed urgent attention. After all, heavy fabrication work can lead to serious accidents at the workplace. However, entrepreneurs as individuals did not have the competence to improve the health and safety conditions of their shop floors. Nor did they have the time. That's why some of them, all members of an existing association, came together in order to deal with the problem. Could their association not ask their customers or large corporations to provide training inputs to their employees? The 300-odd MSMEs in this cluster are vendors for large enterprises like Bharat Heavy Electricals Limited and Suzlon. These two corporations have now supported a training program for safety stewards in 24 vendor enterprises. And these safety stewards have already become positive agents of change in their own workplaces.
சேஃப்டினா என்னன்னு எனக்கு தெரியும் சார். ஆனால் பட் கம்பெனி மூலமாக எப்படி இம்ப்ளிமெண்ட் பண்ணுறதுங்கிறத இந்த சேஃப்டி கிளாஸ் மூலமாக நான் தெரிஞ்சுக்கிட்டேன். இந்த சேஃப்டி கிளாஸில் கற்றுக்கிட்ட போய் எங்கள் ஆஃபீஸில் பையன்கள்ட்டலாம் சொல்லும்போது கொஞ்சம் கஷ்டமாக தான் இருந்துச்சு ஸ்டார்டிங்கில். இப்போ இம்ப்ளிமெண்ட் பண்ணதுலேருந்து ஓரளவுக்கு சேஃப்டி ஷூஸ்லாம் கொடுத்துருக்கோம். அதோட அவேர்னஸ் என்னன்னு அவங்களுக்கு தெரியுது. அதனால் எல்லாருமே யூஸ் பண்ணிகிட்ருக்காங்க. முன்னாடிக்கு இப்போ நல்லா கொஞ்சம் பெட்டராக இருக்குது.
Meanwhile, a different initiative is underway in faraway Bonsthar. A medical camp has been organized in this isolated village, and Srimali and her father are struggling to get there in time. For the poor here, it's a great opportunity to get examined by a doctor and get free treatment. After all, the nearest healthcare center is a good 9 kilometers away. Camps such as these are being organized by a cluster of sponge iron units near Rourkela, and there is a little history to it. A few years ago, the Supreme Court of India passed a significant order.
There is a Supreme Court decision which says that basically for all industries based in the tribal dominated areas, the entrepreneur is supposed to spend 5% of the net profits every year on periphery development.
Community development for villages in the periphery of the cluster. The entrepreneurs had no clue how to implement such a program.
They were ready to spend, but they didn't have the ways out how to do it. They didn't have the manpower, the techniques, how to do it. That things were missing,
UNIDO helped the 13 sponge iron units come together and form their own institution. The society implements rural infrastructure projects like installing hand pumps and building school walls. It also conducts free health camps for the rural poor. So far, more than 12,500 patients have benefited.
पहली बार जो हम आए हैं गैस का शिकायत मेरा था. इसका जब हम दवा लेने का हमको मालूम हुआ, 2-3 औरत हमको बताएं कि डॉक्टर साहब बहुत अच्छे हैं, आए हैं बोल करके. इसका वजह से हम आए हैं दवा लेने के लिए. अब जो हम आए हैं बच्चे को कान जो बाता है उसका इलाज के लिए हम आए हैं.
Providing health and infrastructure in Rourkela, improving health and safety in MSME shop floors in Tiruchirappalli, and eliminating child labour in Jalandhar. Social responsibility is not the domain of large corporations alone. MSMEs too can participate in this movement. But they cannot do it as isolated enterprises. They have to collaborate with other MSMEs. And in this endeavour, the cluster development approach can become an important vehicle, perhaps an indispensable one. The cluster development approach, an approach that MSME clusters can use to become more innovative, more competitive, and now, as the UNIDO Responsible Behaviour Programme has demonstrated, the same approach can help MSMEs address social issues as well. In Jalandhar, for instance, the sports goods cluster has taken steps to eliminate child labour. In Tiruchirappalli, the engineering and fabrication MSMEs have come together to improve the health and safety conditions of their shop floors. And in Rourkela, the sponge iron cluster is implementing infrastructure projects and conducting free health camps for the rural poor. However, these socially responsible initiatives did not take place automatically. They required an external facilitation.
So we had the resources, but we did not have the ideas. So the UNIDO got involved and they helped us to set up this society.
UNIDO played a major role. They came up with ideas, they came up with know-how, everything which we as factory people didn't know.
So, what was the nature of this external facilitation? And what were the systematic steps taken to help clusters discharge their social responsibilities? Similar MSMEs in a particular geographical area are invariably confronted by some social problem or the other. In the case of the Jalandhar sports goods cluster, the issue was child labour.
When we look at from the international buyers, let's say engagement process with the vendors or suppliers from the developing countries, they have a very clearly defined, let's say, policies, guidelines, and then procedures to follow that. And out of that guidelines, child labor is one of the issue which is a zero tolerance issue.
Our foreign customers should not accuse us that we get the stuff made by children. With that one thing in mind, we had started.
Similarly, in the Tiruchirappalli cluster, entrepreneurs felt that occupational health and safety was an important issue.
Health and safety in the SME clusters was, as a focused effort, was absent, if you really ask me, which was not at all there. We have started talking about all this once the businesses started growing much faster, number one. And number two, the nature of business is accident prone. When the volume of work increases, the kind of accidents that happened was very disturbing.
Clusters can face many such issues. Issues like environmental degradation because of carbon-based fuels, pollution because of discharge of effluents, solid waste disposal problems, and anti-industry sentiments prevalent in the communities nearby. For implementing a social responsibility program, it is the issue and its commonality that will often dictate the selection of a cluster.
Development agencies have their own mandate. Some have to work in the area of labor, some in the area of environment, the others in the area of technology. And if you can synergize their mandate with the criticality of the issues of that particular cluster faces, then you can expect a much better outcome. If a development agency has a mandate to work in the area of child labor, then it would be a good idea to work in those clusters that are often accused of using child labor, for example. And brick kiln clusters and ready-made garments in many of the developing countries are often accused of this problem.
Clusters may also be selected because of government stipulations. Take the Rourkela sponge iron cluster, for instance. A Supreme Court order had made it mandatory for all enterprises in scheduled areas to undertake periphery development activity.
There is a Supreme Court decision which says that basically for all industries based in the tribal dominated areas, the entrepreneur is supposed to spend 5% of the net profits every year on periphery development.
That's how UNIDO chose the Rourkela sponge iron cluster. And once a cluster is chosen, the next important step begins, the diagnostic study.